Welcome back to Call Time with Katie Birnbaum. It was so fun chatting with my soul sister in many ways, Teal Wicks, last week about musical theater and Wicked and the Cher Show, and of course, being a not very natural redhead on Broadway. I think you're going to really enjoy my guest this week. I want to bring him in right away. Without further ado, the wonderful Noah Galvin.
Hi.
What's up? We've had some tech issues.
Just a few technical difficulties, but we're here and crystal clear for the time being.
We're using that sweet, I'm guessing AT&T or Verizon data.
Ooh, baby, you bet we're using that AT&T data.
Oh, same here, same here. Before we get started, I'm gonna introduce Noah to our guests for those who may not be familiar, though I'm sure most of you are. And that way Noah doesn't have to toot his own horn and I can do it for him. Noah was a child actor performing at theaters like Playwrights Horizons, MCC, The Vineyard, Signature, The Public, New York Theater Workshop, Barrow Street Theater, and many others before he was even college age. Noah then broke into the TV and film scene. In fact, I'd argue he's one of the first sort of bona fide TV stars we've had on the show. He starred as Kenny O'Neill on the ABC sitcom The Real O'Neills. He then returned to his original home, the stage, to take over the titular role in Dear Evan Hansen on Broadway. Since then, he's also starred as Ogie in Waitress on Broadway, as Joseph in Manhattan Concert Productions' 50th anniversary mounting of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at Lincoln Center. He's appeared in the hit film Booksmart and as Dr. Asher Wolk in ABC's The Good Doctor. It's just such an impressive resume for someone who's my age. I basically can't believe it. I feel almost positive I've missed something. Is there anything big I've missed?
No, that's right.
Okay,
Not at all.
it's mostly from Wikipedia, which, you know, we were taught in college not to use as a source, but there you go. Here I am using it. So I want to start at the beginning. Obviously, you embarked on a professional entertainment career somewhat early. So I'm curious what drove that from such an early age.
I think, obviously, rearing. My parents were artistic individuals. My mom was a documentary filmmaker, and my father was an actor. And then they both sort of like were transitioning out of those careers, and they met at a psychoanalytic institute, wanting to become psychoanalysts. And my dad then became a psychoanalyst, and my mom became a yoga teacher. But they still had these creative roots that were deeply, deeply sowed. And so they wanted to sort of like instill all of those things in their children, and they did very intensely from a young age. I think we were like all in. Just like they wanted us to find our creative passions at a young age, so they just like forced us to do everything. So I was like singing and dancing and acting from like a very, very young age, as well as like art. And like some girl DM'd me the other day and was like, we were in a pottery class together and we were like 4, and I was like, I don't even remember doing pottery, but like sure.
You were like, sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But ultimately I think the thing that really drove me to want to do it professionally is just basically copying my siblings and wanting to be like them. My sister started acting professionally when she was like 16. She started doing like movies, and I thought it was just like the coolest thing ever. When I was little, I would like go watch my dad and I were like, but we love the process. We would go and watch like my sisters like sit in the back of the theater and just like watch the rehearsal, which to some is boring, but to me I was just like eat it up like candy. And then I started, I like really was, my parents didn't really want me to like start acting too soon professionally, but I just pushed them very independently, like pushed them to allow me to. I like went to this voice teacher and was going to this voice teacher, and she had me like secretly sing over the phone for an agent. This agent that day like sent me to an audition. And then I ended up booking the tour of Les Mis when I was like 10, sort of like behind my parents' back and like a little bit against their will. And then when I had booked it, they were like, all right, well, like you did it. Like, do you really want to do this? I had 2 older siblings who were like very much still in like middle school, high school. My parents had full-time jobs. They were like, we can't go on tour with you, but would you like to do this? And I was like, hell yeah, I want to do this. And so we hired that same voice teacher's cleaning lady's cousin who was a 19-year-old Albanian girl named Agnesa. And we went on tour together when I was 10. And the rest is sort of history.
Wow. It's sounding very, that story that like Emma Stone trots out about the PowerPoint that she made her parents about like wanting to become a professional actor.
Maybe slightly more manipulative on my end, but
And what was touring like at 10? I'm so curious.
I mean, it was a blast. I got to like live in hotels and eat at like every rainforest cafe in a major American city I could find. You know what I mean? Like, what could be better? And I was doing epic musical theater at night. And so it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was hard being like away from my family, and I was only 10, and there were 4 kids in the show, and both boys rotated every night and both girls rotated every night. But the girls were in it every night because one had to be little Eponine and one had to be little Cosette. On Broadway, they have 3 little girls who all rotate, and there's always one off. But on tour, they can only afford 2. So I was the little Eponine understudy. And there was a week in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where this girl Gabby just like decided, because she was 8 years old, she just like decided like she didn't want to do the show for a week. And so I had to go on as little Eponine every night in a blue dress and a blonde wig. Honestly, making like great money as a 10-year-old drag queen.
I'm obsessed with that story. Wow. And so like, Les Mis ahead of its time, so progressive.
Exactly.
I'm sure you've heard like the trope of like the child star. Did you have experiences that sort of aligned with that, or did you always feel very grounded? Because then you went to school, you grew up in Katona, and I feel like you were balancing your schoolwork with your professional work. So do you feel like that trope is true? Did you feel far away from that? What was your experience?
I mean, I certainly didn't feel that when I was like actually working, because like theater, like we're all in the muck of it. Nobody's like being like given all brown M&Ms, we're all eating at the same rainforest cafe. But then when I would like go home to Westchester, when I'd like go home to Katona, so that first stint when I was in Les Mis was probably like 9 or 10 months. And then I went back. I decided to leave the tour because 6th grade, middle school was starting. And I had missed like the latter half of 5th grade. And that is when like a lot of things changed for like a lot of the kids at school, because it was when the like 4 elementary schools in the Katona Lewisboro school district,
shout out,
that's when they all like come together, these 4 schools. And I had missed the sort of like big picnics that were happening, all the kids meeting, all the kids starting to like, be on AIM together, relationships forming, romance. And then I had just been on tour, just like doing musical theater. And then I came back and like everybody was like different. And like they all treated me as if I was the like child star, but I so wasn't. And I didn't feel that way at all. I was like, I've just been doing Les Mis. And then I like came back to school and they were like, we get it, like you're better than us and blah 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 blah. And I was ostracized like very intensely by this like group. But then they had like broken up too, because some of them had like boyfriends in 6th grade and like whatever, so it was an interesting dynamic. But whenever I would go, that's why I think at that time like working became like my safe space. Like whenever I would work, I just felt like I could be myself, in X, Y, and Z ways.
And then I feel like you worked at these theaters that I listed when you were young that are really amazing, like sort of off Broadway giants of the theater. And it's interesting because I feel like most kids, you started in Les Mis, but I feel like most kid actors are doing sort of like big budget Disney commercial stuff. So what was it like doing more like I don't want to call like, the public avant-garde, but slightly more avant-garde.
No, but I was doing like weirdy off-Broadway theater,
Yeah. What was that like? And was that like a conscious choice on your part, or was it just more like I'm in New York and therefore I want to do New York things?
I think like both. I think my mother was always like a driving force. She was always like a huge proponent of like theater, 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 theater. And so I was like singing a lot, doing a lot of musical theater. And the first off-Broadway show I did was a musical that I had like workshopped at New York Stage and Film and did a production of, and then they brought it to Playwrights, and it was called The Burnt Part Boys. And that was my first like proper off-Broadway show. And after that show, it was such a good musical, and it was like very much a play and very much not like musical theatery in a way I had never experienced before. And it sort of like opened my eyes. And I was like, oh, this is more appealing to me. The idea that I can like play characters and like really dig my teeth into like some text. And so I started like seeking out those opportunities in a realer way. And that's when I like moved to the city. When I was doing that show at Playwrights is when I like moved to the city when I was like 14, 15. And I started going to like a performing arts school in Midtown. And as I was like finishing that move, is when I booked David Cromer's Our Town. And that was another like another like step into this world.
Which I
full of
famously
like,
saw you in.
really?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't know you at the time, but I do have the only time, this is really embarrassing, but the only time a phone of mine has ever gone off. I had
It was
gotten
in that show.
yeah, I had gotten my first cell phone. It was a cherry chocolate. Do you remember what that was?
Of
And
course.
of course, and I think I was like 13, and I didn't know, I had just gotten it. I didn't know how to like turn off the sound. And I remember at like a really, really quiet part of David Cromer's Our Town, it went off, and I like looked around as if I like,
You were like, who?
whose
Egregious.
phone is this? And then sure enough, it was mine, and I wanted to die, but it's made me anyway. So for many reasons, I will always remember that production, but
Yeah,
that's
that trauma you'll carry with you forever. That is a lesson I think everybody's had to learn at a certain point. But in
yeah.
that show in particular, it's rough because you're just like, everybody can see everybody.
100%. It was like the worst possible situation for a phone to go off. Oh my gosh, yes, I had forgotten you did that. So incredible. I love that production.
Thank you. Yeah, I did too. I got to see, yeah. So when I booked that, my sister was in it as well. She was playing Rebecca Gibbs, and I was playing Wally Webb. So we were like the younger siblings in like either of the opposite families. Well, she went to Carnegie Mellon as an actor, and she was sort of like out of school for the year. And we booked that. She had booked it, and then I booked it, and it was just like a nice thing that like me and my sister got to like be off Broadway together and do this thing. And so then we just like very much immersed ourselves like in the off-Broadway community as like siblings and as a duo. And then it was sort of just from there I just kept doing it because I realized that like as much as I loved singing, I found the people like slightly more interesting and interested in, I guess, straight theater. And I just kept wanting to like seek out those opportunities. And the only other musical that I did was when I was a senior in high school. And it was like the fall of my senior year of high school. And I was 18. I was in this musical called The Great American Mouseicle, which was it was a musical that was based on a children's book that Julie Andrews wrote with her daughter. And we did it at good speed, and she directed it. Julie Andrews directed it. And like my first regional theater experience on my own, like as an adult, but I was still in high school. Then like went back to straight theater for a few years and like worked at the Huntington and did a new Carol Churchill play in New York Theater Workshop and sort of like potshkied around. It worked at the Rattlestick, you know, as you do. And then eventually like found my way to LA to like, you know, test for television and then finally book a TV show.
Yeah, let's talk about that. What was that? Had you always been interested in that? Because I know you said you like watched your sister on movie sets. So was that something that was always in the back of your mind? What was like the impetus for making that jump?
Maybe a little, but it was always like so foreign to me because all I had known was like New York and theater, and like the theater was very much my home. I would audition, like I would have like my agents like put me on tape for, you know, random movies or whatever, but like they felt so, it felt so large and amorphous and this thing that I had like no relation to like whatsoever, that I really was just like, I'm a theater actor, like that's what we do. And then I like put something on tape and got a call that was like, they're gonna fly you to LA and like you're gonna do the thing. And I was like, whoa, like what is this? And actually, I'm now remembering, I was in rehearsals for this play at New York Theater Workshop for this Carol Churchill play called Love and Information. It was a New York Theater Workshop play that was done at the Minetta Lane. And we were probably like week 2 of rehearsals, and I got this call and they were like, you have to go to LA. And I was like, I'm in rehearsals. I had my agents like sort of like suss it out, and New York Theater Workshop was like not down because it would ultimately mean if I booked it that I would have had to like leave the production, and we were like too deep. It was a ridiculous play with like, how many people were in that play? A lot of actors in that play. And it was like, basically the script for Love and Information is like you open it and it just looks like a poem, like no delineation by like character or no real stage directions. It's just like a poem. Yeah. But you know, we did like table work for probably like 2 weeks because we just had to figure out like what characters we were playing, who was in the scene, how many people were in the scene, like crazy, crazy, crazy. The most fun doing a play I think I've ever had in my life, but just like an insane process that I very much could not have pulled out of. But I was like, I need to go to LA. I need to just like see if this is a thing. So I called in sick, and I called my stage manager like that morning and I was like, I'm feeling ill. Was fully in Los Angeles already. And he was like, okay, like, is there any way you can come for like the afternoon session? Because like, you know, it's just rehearsal with like the 2 of you. And I was like, I am so sick. I can't come. And so I stayed in LA. I then called in sick the next day too. And they were like, do we need to like get you to a doctor? Like, what's the deal? And I was like, no, like, I'm good. I'm just like, you know, I'm really sick. And then tested for the show, and it went well, but it was so strange, like doing like comedy in front of a room when I tested, it was just like in a room of like men in suits, and it was like a very funny script, but like nobody laughed, and I was like, this is not like theater. I was like, that should have felt like theater, and it did not feel like theater. And then went back to New York and had this like amazing time doing this play. After that, during pilot season, I was getting flown out to LA to like test for a TV show. And that happened 3 years in a row. And then finally, like the last year, I was testing for 2 shows. One was a Fox pilot and one was The Real O'Neills. And I wanted the Fox pilot more. It was a show that was based on Rivers Cuomo's life. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Basically, he like went back to college after he had already been a successful musician. And it was sort of like a multicam pilot about that. And I was playing his like weirdy roommate. And then I had to like race across town after that test and go to ABC to test for The Real O'Neills, where I was sort of just like playing myself. And I was like, well, this isn't as fun. Like, I'm from the theater. I want to play characters. I want to play the weirdy roommate. I don't want to like play this like normie gay kid. And then I ended up booking The Real O'Neills, and it was different in that like all of the tests I had ever done were in rooms full of men in suits who didn't laugh at my jokes. And then when I got to The Real O'Neills, first of all, my guardian angel, Tracy Toms, was outside of the room. And she had just come out and she was like, hey, I saw you in a production of King Lear in somebody's apartment once. And I was like, yes, you did. And then she was like, see you on set, and like left. And I was like, that was the blessing I needed. I went into the room and there were like no men in suits. It was just two writers and this director named Todd Holland. And Todd Holland was like, we're going to put you on this little stage and we're going to light you and we're going to make like the best tape ever. And I was like, okay. He was like, and then we're going to take that tape and that's going to be your test and we're going to show it to the network. He was like, I watched your audition tapes and I can tell that you have abilities, but you have no idea how to be on camera. And I was like, you're right. And so he just like worked with me for like an hour and we made a really great tape. And then he like sent it to the network and the studio and it got okayed by everybody. And then I booked it. And then I had to like finish this play I was doing at this A.R. Gurney play I was doing at the Signature at the time. I had to like finish that up and then move to LA. And that's like, you know, I sort of got to like say goodbye to theater for a second by way of A.R. Gurney. R.I.P.
R.I.P. The monologue that I used to do for like college admissions was A.R. Gurney. So very, very familiar. And my dad would be behind the camera, like, oh, we've heard this.
Yes, of course.
What a way to say goodbye. Wow. So you got like basically an on-camera like master class from this director. And then obviously from being in this TV show. And I think you're so impressive, as I said at the beginning, because you toggle between all of these genres, between TV and film and theater, but also within those genres, between genres within them. Like you're doing an A.R. Gurney and also a Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Just to put two together.
I like that as a spectrum though.
Yeah. Do you say to yourself now when you're working, like you're about to start shooting again for The Good Doctor, do you like code switch in your head between camera work and doing a show? Do you code switch between something like Joseph and something like A.R. Gurney? Or are you just like very organically being like, what's the character and it switches between every project?
Honestly, I think it's sort of case by case.
Yeah.
But it's something I've always said, like from the beginning of my career, like when I would like talk about my career at the age of like 16 with my mother, she'd be like, what do you want? You know? And I was working with all these like different types of actors and, you know, people who had like been on television or people who had just been theater actors their whole lives, or like, you know, a large variety. And I would ultimately just say like, I want variety, I want longevity within my career, you know? And I think the only way to really have longevity is to like have the variety within your career and be able to oscillate between the different modes, be it like film or TV or theater or, you know, whatever it may be. It's the thing that like satisfies me and like keeps me on my toes. And the fun of being an actor is that we get to like, we have the opportunity to do it all. And I think, you know, we're not always given those opportunities, but like it is an option. And if people are like down, then, you know, you can jump in. And that's like my favorite thing to do is to just play, you know?
Yeah. And you're such a good example of that, because I think for some people, of course, training is good and like conservatory training is valuable, but you're such a good example of someone who doesn't have that, but sort of like learned by doing and was like thrown into the deep end and now has been able to do all of these different things that you train for in a conservatory. Do you ever wish that you had, you know, gone to a college conservatory experience, or you never think about that?
No, I think about it. I definitely think about it. And my sister went to Carnegie Mellon and was a huge,
Right.
huge proponent. When I was doing the Great American Mouseicle at Goodspeed, that was the time, my fall of my senior year in high school, that was the time when like I was on the phone with my mother every day debating like, do I go to school? Do I not go to school? And she was like, talk to as many people as you can, talk to everybody around you, ask them for advice, ask them what their experience was, ask them what they think college or conservatory education would give to you, like do this. And so that's what I did. And I like, you know, even leading up to that, the like, you know, spring of my junior year, going into when I was doing a play called Treasure Island, which was an adaptation of Treasure Island. It was like 18-man sword fights. It was ridiculous. I had asked like all of those guys and all of those directors and the writer, and then I had like gone into the Great American Musical, and I was like asking all of those people. I was asking my like theater teachers in high school, and the greatest takeaway I got from like what would college give me, just like as a person, not even as an actor, was just like the thing I heard most from people was like, you're going to meet the friends that will like be your lifelong mates. These will be like, you'll make the best friends you've ever made. And at the time I was like, I have friends. And ultimately it came down to like, do I want to like pay to do this thing, or do I want to get paid to do this thing?
Yeah.
And like, if people are giving me these opportunities, they're opportunities to learn. Like, everything was an education, you know? And I got to like, because of the variety within my career, I got to do this play at the Rattlestick where I was like playing an autistic child who then had like a sobbing, like cry fest monologue at the very end. The whole play was like, it was a Daniel Talbot play called Yosemite. And it was like, you know, this mother who like, we're like digging a grave for like a dead baby in a trash bag. And like, we're wearing like snow suits the whole time. And then like our mother comes on stage with a shotgun, and like last moment of the play is like shotgun blackout, you know, like who died. I got to like do that. And then I got to like do Treasure Island, where I got to do like sword fights and like play, you know, but it was just like the juiciest education I could have ever gotten, and probably more in depth than I would have gotten going to a conservatory where like, you know, sometimes they like to pigeonhole you and only let you like play certain types of roles or whatever it, you know, may have been. It can be a limiting experience. And at the time I was like, I want to keep doing this because it feels like people are down.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think you had an amazing opportunity in your career because you were also, even though you had been a child actor, you had these experiences when you would have been in school where you could sort of mark your transition from being a child actor to an adult actor and learn on the go and have sort of in between type roles and grow into who you were as an adult, which I think is unique. And sometimes when you take a pause and go to college, it can be then hard to be like, I'm reintroducing myself as an adult human.
Right. This is sort of like the job where I feel like I'm like doing that. This is the first time I've ever really played an adult in my life. On The
How
Good
is that
Doctor.
feeling? Do you feel like, are you approaching it differently? Are you like self-conscious about it? What's the vibe?
I mean, I will say I like, you know, I booked it like middle of the pandemic. And so I had like big scruffy beard and my hair long for the first time ever in my life, like had like a facial hair and like long hair. And I had sort of convinced myself like that is what helped me book the role. And then I got there to Canada, where we filmed in Vancouver, and they were like, so we're gonna shave you clean and cut your hair. And I had like a moment of freak out because I was like, less than 4 years ago, I was on the same network playing 15, and I'm like you know, last year, like a 26-year-old man with a beard and long hair. And I was like, this is who I feel like right now. I don't feel like a little like twinky 15-year-old gay kid who's like discovering himself. And I really had to like go to bat for myself in that moment. I was like, I need to personally feel different in order to like do this thing. And it was maybe vain and maybe like simply aesthetic, but in the moment I was like, I think this is the thing that I need to like make myself feel older and make myself feel like I'm not playing a doctor, you know, that I'm not just like a child, you know, very much wanting to like play adult, but to like really feel like an adult and feel like I can like be a part of this adult ensemble cast and feel like I belong, you know?
Yeah, I mean, now that I'm thinking about your career, and I think this is true on Broadway and both TV and film, like it's an extended adolescence. Like so many of the people in Mean Girls and are getting called in and they're like 27 and they're playing 17, which is
Exactly. It's a dangerous like road of regression, or it can
yeah.
be.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's like every show you audition for on Broadway now is like, okay, I got to carry like a JanSport backpack and like be a kid. I want to go back to that though, because I want to talk about Evan Hansen. Last week I spoke with an Alphaba and we had an interesting conversation about like the isolation of playing Alphaba, both because in the show it's kind of isolating and because you have to live like a nun beyond the show. And I assume the same is true to play Evan Hansen. So I'm curious because it seems to me, based on talking with you, you love like the communal experience of theater or even of doing a sitcom. So what was that like? Was it isolating? Was it tough? Was it challenging? What was it like?
All of the above. I think I mean, compared to like my man's in the other room, Mr. BP, I clearly I didn't have to do it for like years. So that was really, really nice. I had this sort of like in the audition process, before I auditioned, they were like, the contract is a year. And I was like, I don't think I can or want to do that. And they were like, okay, well, why don't you just come and audition anyway? So I flew to New York and I did the whole audition process. And I then went back to LA because I was based in LA at the time. And I got this like magic call that was like, you booked it. And guess what? You only have to do it for 3 months because Taylor Trench can't get out of his Hello Dolly contract. And I was like, hell yes, let's go. Because it was like this like controlled insanity. I guess like 5 months, like rehearse for a couple and then jump into the show for like 3.5 months and just like throw everything I have at this role and like get in like the best singing shape I'd like ever been in. No drinking and no dairy. And I sort of like, I was very much the guinea pig because nobody had done it besides Ben. And so I was like, when I came into that process, they were like, it's gonna be rough. And I was like, let's go. But I think because I had in the back of my mind just that it was only 3 months, I like could go, all in very quickly and very much just like jumped in. But it was very isolating. And they like put me up like in an apartment like 2 blocks away from the theater. So it was very much this like very insular, like intense, like 47th Street, 45th Street, like, just an intense experience, but I loved it. I loved it because I got to like, sink my teeth in and play a character.
Yeah, for sure.
In a real way.
I'm curious too, obviously, as you mentioned, the only person who had played it before was Ben. Was there, and it's such an iconic, it already had taken on like a culture of celebrity around it and specifically around the role itself. I assume you didn't feel pressure to make it too similar and you wanted to make it your own. So what was it like? Were you like, okay, I can't watch any videos of Ben do it, I have to like completely take it from my own perspective? Or were you trying to take elements from both?
No, I think, it's a weird thing to step into. Again, I was like the guinea pig and they were sort of figuring out like, I think my rehearsal process was like, how much do I need to replicate Ben's performance and how much do I get the freedom to have this performance be my own?
Yeah.
And in that first rehearsal with Michael Greif, I like sat down at the table with him and then like every cast member sort of like came in like half-hour stints and just like read through all of our scenes together. I sat down with him first and he was like, right off the bat, he was like, I'm going to be completely honest with you. My vision is that it's 90% yours and 10% Ben's. There are going to be a few things that like I will not let go of as a director who has like shaped this performance and shaped the show to my liking. And then 90% of it is like you just getting to find it for yourself. And I was like, that sounds great. I thought you were gonna say 50-50. So like that is cool to me. Um, but it was just like I mean, it's a crazy thing being handed like a script and score that's like that fatty and juicy, and just getting to like see what happens, you know?
Yeah. No, it's, you sound so like, you just sound so healthy about it that it's like, all right, let's just see how it goes. I mean, obviously that's fine because you did it and it was amazing, but
But yes, I mean, like daunting and terrifying and like
yes.
horrible all at the same time, you know? And when I like went into the show for that first week, like what do they call them? Like the Hansens? They like hated me. They like really did not like me. There was
Wow.
like a 12-year-old girl somewhere in like the middle of the country that created these accounts called Exposing Noah Galvin that my friend Olivia Puckett, who's in the show too, found. And she was like, we have to do a deep dive. And so we like read through all of it. It was it's wild. It was wild. But these kids
Yeah.
like feel such ownership over like this role, and it like means so much to them. And of course, like his performance in particular means so much to them. They're like, don't fuck this up for us, you know?
How keyed into that like fan culture have you been on all your various projects? Because Waitress has a huge following too.
Yeah. I mean, it's on Broadway, it's so fun because you get to like something that Ben didn't really do was like the stage drawing, because it was like really arduous and he had been doing it for like 4 years or whatever. But because I was only there for 3 months, I was like, why not? And so I would go out there every night and like commune with them, and it felt like it was a way that like it was a way to like keep myself from going crazy in the isolation and from
Yeah.
just like sinking into the like the darkness of that show, which can be like all encompassing and a black hole of emotion that you have to like launch yourself into, just like hurl your body into every night, you know, and just go to like dark places every time you're on that stage. And so to be able to like go and just like hug strangers, ha ha ha, COVID, never again, was really really therapeutic. And like it felt like, I mean, we all went through this like public catharsis together, like we might as well just like shake a hand or like hug after the show, you know? And it felt
Yeah.
like a way of like putting my feet back on the ground.
Yeah. I have so many questions based on that. First, obviously that show is so dark, and you've mentioned a lot of off Broadway type shows that you did that sound also, or I know are very dark. And then you did this ABC sitcom that's more funny, and Waitress is hilarious, and you're so funny in Booksmart. I know you mentioned variety is what you crave, but do you feel more at home in comedy or drama? Are you doing comedy for a while and then part of you is like, oh, I need to return to that darkness. I need to explore it, or vice versa? Or is it just like, whatever, I'll do either. Both I like.
I mean, the latter for sure. Like I will do anything because it's fun. Um, and variety is again what I crave.
Yeah.
But I think I feel comedy is something that comes like very naturally to me. Um, and it just like makes me happy, you know?
Yeah.
But the other stuff, things that I like didn't find until I was like, you know, 16 and doing like straight theater, that was when I realized like I could like really tap into like different parts of myself, and I could like utilize like darkness in myself that I like hadn't ever before.
Mhm.
And I got to like stretch myself as a human in those ways. And comedy can very often feel like you're sort of just like dee, 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 sort of like tiptoeing around things. Um, but honestly, I yearn for the jobs that allow me to like marry those two
Yeah.
things, you know, the dramedies of the world, where you get a little bit of both. Because I think like that's life.
Absolutely. And I think more and more of the stuff that's being created now are both. I think certainly in the past it was much more like, oh, you're
I
doing
think
a
so.
comedy or you're doing a drama.
Yeah.
um
I mean, certainly like my favorite things I'm watching right now are, have you watched White Lotus? That's like, I'd say a perfect little like marriage of the two.
I want to ask too, based on that, you said you obviously feed off variety and you want to do it all. Looking forward, because you've already had such an amazing career? Or first of all, do you spend a lot of time thinking about your career moving forward, or because you've had like such an intense career already, are you just sort of like taking it day by day in terms of what comes? Or do you sit around like making goals, being like, in the next few years, I want to do XYZ? It's a very personal question, but I'm just curious.
No, I think there was a time in my life where I like where I'd like set literal age goals for myself,
Yeah.
none of which have been met. But at
I
a
find that
certain
hard
point,
to
like,
believe, but
but saw like, eventually just saw a chorus line where that, the character like has that monologue where she's like, this is stupid, don't do that.
yeah.
Setting goals for yourself in terms of like at 18, I'll like be on Broadway, or like by this point I'll be doing that, and
Yeah.
it's like, that's dumb. And that's not how life works. As I get older, I've just realized that like the opportunities that I want for myself are maybe not going to just like appear, and that like that takes me like either having a hand in the like creation of these things or whatever that may be.
Yeah, I was going
And
to
so
ask if you have any interest in like directing, writing, producing, any of that going forward.
yeah, me and Ben and a couple of our other friends are writing a movie right now, that will hopefully be made in 2022, which is exciting. But I think I want to keep evolving, like I have done throughout my career. I feel like I started as like a little like musical theater boy, and then I like found straight theater, and then I found television, which led me to film, which led me to like Broadway, which led me to, I want to just keep doing that, keep like going on this journey.
It's so wonderful. And I also want to ask too, this is something I think about a lot. Obviously, as creative people, often most of our friends are also in creative industries, and you have a lot of friends that are very successful in entertainment. Do you ever find yourself like wishing you could turn that off in your like friend groups, or is it only helpful that like everyone understands already like what the game is, what the entertainment biz is?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's a dramedy. It's like you I think the thing that honestly like led me to these people is because we all at some point worked together, and
Yeah.
that's how I was like introduced to them. Like I know by way of like Amali Gordon, who I did this workshop with, who
Right.
introduced me to Ben, who introduced me to Beanie, who introduced me to like, and so I don't think I would have found them if we weren't all in this business or be like creative individuals. And so I think it is this like beautiful little family of creatives, which is a gorgeous thing. But also it like has its like ickies as well too,
As with any friend group, if you had
as
if
with any friend group.
if you were in finance and all of your friends were in finance, I'm sure you would be like, God, I wish I had some actor friends sometime.
Exactly. I'm sure they're having the same conversations about Jessica Voss.
Didn't she used to work in finance though? So I feel like maybe that's true.
She did. Maybe they are.
Yeah, exactly. I always end with a segment that I call the Thank You Five segment, which is basically like the Vogue 73 questions, but smaller budget. So it's just 5 rapid fire ones. So just answer off the top of your head, first thing that comes to you. First, your favorite role that you played as a kid and favorite production in which you performed as a kid.
Favorite role I played as a kid would have to be the role of Rupert in this play called Esther Demsack that was at the Public, directed by Stafford Arima, written by a man named Billy Finnegan, who I later worked with on The Real O'Neills. He was a writer on The Real O'Neills as well. But it was this play about like a little boy and his like fancy nanny that comes to live with like him and his single father. And it was just like really dramatic, and I was like 13 years old and got to like scream and like really act for the first time in my life, and it was like it really opened my eyes. And favorite production I got to do as a child was honestly probably Les Mis. It was just so fun to be in like epic musical theater every night. Was, I mean, literally a dream come true.
Would you ever, this is not one of the thank you five, but I'm just thinking of it. Would you ever return to Les Mis now as an adult?
Maybe in like 20 years as a Thenardier.
You'd be amazing. Uh,
Thank you.
you'd be amazing. Wow. I'll put some money aside now to reserve my ticket for that.
Thank you.
Next, the hardest thing about playing Evan Hansen.
The hardest thing about playing Evan Hansen was the no dairy. To not be able to just like have a sweet treat at the end of the night, was an upsetting thing. Like a real sweet treat.
Yes. Yes. No, I truly understand. And it's so annoying that like it actually does make a difference. Like I used to think it was an old wives' tale, and it does make a difference.
It does. Unfortunately, it does.
Sorry to break it to everyone. Your craziest fan story. You already mentioned the is it that Instagram account? What was it? Exposing Noah Galvin?
Exposing Noah Galvin. It was that, but because of that, our producer like called me and she was like, "Are you safe?" And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "I just saw the Instagram. Like, are you safe?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm safe." And she was like, "Do you want like a bodyguard for the evening?" And I was like, "No, like I'm good. It's like it's just an Instagram account." And that was probably the craziest it ever got, was when I got a call from production being like, "Find shelter."
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I think
the 12-year-olds are after you.
The 12-year-olds are after you. And older generations don't really see the difference between like internet harm and like physical harm, even though they can coexist. Scary. We're getting to some scary stuff. You have a dream role either in theater or I guess I could say TV film, but a remake. I don't know. It's more like theater.
In terms of musical theater, it is the MC in Cabaret is my dream role. When I was in high school, the only school show I've ever done was my senior year in high school, right after I got back from Goodspeed doing Great American Mouseicle. I missed the initial auditions and all of the kids were like pissed that I just got to go straight to callbacks. But I then booked the MC in our school production of Cabaret. And I was also like doing a bunch of readings at the time and not showing up to my academic classes and only showing up to my theater classes and rehearsal. And they were like, "This isn't how it works. Like you can't just not go to school and only show up to rehearsal." So I got fired. It's the only show I've ever been fired from. So I wasn't ever given the opportunity to do it. And it's like my favorite thing in the world. And so at some point I want that opportunity again,
That is scandalous that you got fired.
I know.
Oh, wow. They were taking it seriously over there at Professional Children's School.
It was the jankier version, the janky public version called PPAS, Professional Performing Arts School, which is basically the school where they like let you work and they just sort of like look the other way.
Right. But not in this case. This was a step too far for them.
This was a step too far.
I feel like one day you and Ben should Little Foxes the MC where you switch off each night.
We've talked about Little Foxing something. We have to figure out what it will be eventually. And it won't be for another like 15, 20 years. But yes, when it does happen, ooh, baby, it'll be juicy.
It'll be juicy. And I'm really glad Little Fox has become a verb in the theatrical vernacular. And then my last of the thank you five, do you have any advice for aspiring theatrical actors, dancer, singer, producer, writer types who may be watching, hopefully none of whom created the Exposing Noah Galvin account?
And if you are, welcome. I'd say my advice is, I don't know, a couple things. I'd say like, do your homework is something that's like big. I think when people ask me for like audition advice and things like that, it's like, do your homework. And to piggyback on that, also like don't stop stretching yourself, because don't get complacent, because it's like, this business is so fluid, and it can be if you allow it to be, and I I've been very lucky and I've been given many an opportunity. That's not lost on me, but I also have like sought out opportunities that weren't necessarily like obvious. And so if you're like given an opportunity that scares you, take it.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. And I think you also are an actor that, based on talking with you and knowing your work, like, even though you didn't go to like even liberal arts college, you're a very sort of like literary seeming actor. Like, it's about the text, it's about doing the homework, it's about understanding the whole piece, which I think is so important in an actor.
Me too. Me too. I mean, like, we're students. Let's be good students, right?
Absolutely. Is there anything you feel that I've missed? Anything you want to discuss in your career? Anything, any glaring blind spots that I've missed?
I don't think so. I will show my nails to everybody though, because
They're
they're really
fabulous.
pretty. I'm
They're
getting
really
them
good.
taken off.
Where did you get them done?
I didn't keep them over.
Your internet went out, so but
Are you serious?
it sounded sort of like it was like a purposeful blurring. So maybe we'll keep the identity of the nail salon safe. safe. No, they're fabulous, and you're going up to Canada to start shooting The Good Doctor. How are you
Yes.
feeling about that, like in the pandemic? And I guess you've already been shooting in the pandemic. So what has that been like?
Honestly, I'm excited for this season 5, because season 4 there was like a 2-week quarantine in Canada. So it felt a little Evan Hansen-y, if you will, without the like arduous emotional public catharsis every night.
And you could probably eat dairy.
And you bet I can eat dairy. So that was like, it was isolating because of that. Whenever Ben would visit, he could come for like 2 weeks, but we would be trapped in, a house quarantining. And so I'm excited for this season because there is no quarantine. And so I can come back and forth from LA a little bit more and have people come visit. I'm excited to show people Vancouver at the end of the day. I'm just trying to expose people to the beauty of Vancouver.
I've never been. I've heard it's beautiful. My aunt is from there, so I got to take a trip.
If you'd like me to expose you to British Columbia, more than happy to.
Ultimately, this is a tourist ad for British Columbia. Well, thank you so much, Noah. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Call Time listeners, as always. We'll have an amazing interview next week for you. Thanks for watching. Have a good week.